Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. Um, Today is May the 5th, Cinco de Mayo. And I've been thinking about making another video. Let me just go ahead and say it's difficult for me. I'm more of a outdoors, hands-on, let's get some things done kind of person rather than sitting down and talking to a phone. Excuse me, but anyway, today is May the 5th, 2026, and it's been on my heart to share my testimony, or at least begin that journey. A lot to say, obviously, and I'm not one, like I said, to just to kind of go through it. But anyway, so I guess I could start with a little bit of where I come from. So I was raised in church, somewhat in and out, I would say, not necessarily all the time, but there were periods where we would be going like all the time. If there's a revival, it was pretty much, 6 days a week or 7 days, a lot. And then other times we wouldn't be going. And so nonetheless, high level is that we did go. So I did have a church background, and it was Pentecostal. So it was if you're familiar with that denomination, it's high spirited. So anyway, yeah, and we moved around a lot. My dad enjoyed traveling, and so we moved around a lot. And we ended up in Georgia because of my parents worked for a company that moved here. We moved here from Oregon, which was, to name all the states that we lived in, quite a few. So we didn't really stay very long in one place. A lot of times it was, a year or so. And so we did move around quite a bit. But ended up in Georgia in the 80s or 83. So I went to high school in Fayetteville, Georgia. In 83, I was a sophomore, I think. And, no, 83. Yeah, 83, 84, 85. I graduated in 85. So that's how we ended up here. And, I guess without going all the way back, but needless to say, going to church, I grew up pretty much very rigid and very strict. My mother was very strict when it came to that. And so I am grateful that we did grow up in church, although being a Christian now, I often wonder if it probably would have been easier not to have known really religious things. It probably would have been beneficial in some ways, and in some ways, I don't know. But that said, before that, so I would say in Oregon is when I kind of started feeling a bit different. I did have a boyfriend, and he loved me so, but I was young, 15, 16, and I really didn't have those kinds of like fluttering and whatever. But because I was in sports, and I also played basketball and was in the band, the marching band, and so I felt comfortable. I had friends, was part of the band again. Um, Pretty much social in my high school days, and but I remember at that point I started developing feelings for um, the same sex, and so um, that was confusing, but at the same time, I think at that age you're really just kind of coming into your own. Um, you're really just figuring out who you want to be, what you like, that all. It's like those things are kind of coming to your forefront, other than being um excuse me, like a teenager. You're coming into your own. You're learning about what you like, who you like, your popularity or your friend groups, and your all of those things. So that started coming out, and obviously growing up um religious, I knew that wasn't really right. That wasn't something I wanted to do. Well, I say it's something I wanted to do. It wasn't normal. Let's just say that. It wasn't normal. My sisters, I had two sisters. I'm the middle sister. And so they had boyfriends. Obviously my mother, you just know that's what you learn when you're growing up. Girl things versus boy things. And of course, we do have an older brother, but he got in trouble early on, and so he pretty much was not really around a lot. So it was usually just really me and my two sisters, and so obviously I was very well aware of girl things. I just didn't fit in. I was a tomboy, and from the word go, from my earliest memory. And so, um, yeah, I didn't necessarily do the girl things. And so I started like having those feelings in middle school, early high school, I would say is where it was. I was a freshman. Yeah. And sorry about the phone. But so that's pretty much how that started. Very confusing, kept to myself, because there was really nobody to talk to at that point. Nobody. Um, and so I just went with it. And so next thing you know, there's a few things in there, but overall, that's when I started realizing that whole situation. And so we moved to Georgia because my parents got transferred. My dad got transferred. Well, I think both of them worked for the same company at the time. Um, so yeah, we moved to Georgia and started school. And I'll be honest, I did not want to move to the South. When you're kind of raised, and keep in mind, we did live in Tennessee, we lived in Indiana, lived in Arizona, lived in Ohio, just all over the map. But for the most part, for my adolescent and early preteen years, was on the West Coast. And so I was born in California. So, I mean, that was where I kind of really um, thought home would be, or that's where, I lived. And so moving to the South was not something that was, I'd always heard that, the South is backwards and they're hicks and, whatever, whatever, whatever. And so I am really what it was for the most part was the fact that I just did not, I was coming into my own, it was like coming of age, I was kind of really, uh, at that point, um, really coming into my own. I started having feelings and I had friends and, you know, um, that. And so I did not want to leave. And I remember telling myself, and this is bad, don't ever do that if you're a young person and you happen to be catching this video in the future or whenever. Don't ever kind of tell yourself or convince, I was so upset that I didn't want to move to Georgia that I was just like, you know what, I was in the sports, like I said, I was very much involved with friends and all of that in school with extracurricular activity and whatnot, and so I just was like, okay, well, I'm not when we, when we get there, I'm not going to try out for sports. I'm not going to, be in the band. I'm not going to try anything. I'm done. I'm done or, whatever. Just that rebellious kind of attitude. Well, I was just like, I'm not just trying anymore. So when we get to Georgia, um, needless to say, natural, um, thing was to, okay, um, try out for basketball. Am I going to be in the band? That was, one of those things. And I remember I did try out and I made the team, but I didn't stay in it. It was like I put a thing on me that was like, um yeah, just don't even try. Just, you know just 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 do your time or school. Anyway, that was just my mindset back then, and sure enough, you end up when you're not making those kind of friends, you end up making really, sometimes the wrong friends, and or not really good relationships, not good, I don't know. It's hard to kind of explain, and I apologize, but I hope that it's conveying that I was selling myself short. I was giving up. We moved so much. I was just kind of like, when you're a teenager like that, that's a hard move, especially when really you aren't, um, you're not really fitting into the whole family structure to begin with. So then, you're always feeling like you're the black sheep, you're the odd man out or whatever. And so that's just where I was. And so, mistake. That's a mistake. Um, so we get to Georgia, and again, that's when, I just kind of withdrew. You know what I mean? I withdrew. I didn't seek out friends. I didn't get involved. I just kind of, yeah, just withdrew. I didn't know really what to do with myself. So high school happened. Yeah, there was a boyfriend here, an interest there, but nothing really meaningful. Like I said, it just almost, I feel like when I look back and I think back on those days, it's almost at that point, I think I just, like I said, I withdrew and I just shut down. Um, just, I just was like, I don't know where I went, but just managed. So anyway, made a few friends, but they were partiers, and so that occurred. And of course, as high school went on, I did end up making a few friends that were in the lifestyle. But back then you didn't talk about those things. You didn't really. That's not something that you know. That's not something that really was commonplace for me anyway that I remember. And so yeah, so then so I barely finished high school because at that point, like I said, and we started going to church, um, as a family, us, my sisters and mom and dad, and of course my older sister met her husband in church, and my parents did the best they could, going to church and all that. And then but I was already detached at that point. I look back, I was already detached. My younger sister, she met her husband, and all of that, and I met someone, but they were not of the opposite sex, so I kind of already went that direction and was just trying to figure where I belonged, where I fit in. And so trying to live my life, I guess, I don't know. But anyway, I did, and I met a friend, and we ended up in a relationship. And but it was one of those relationships where it was not appropriate, or not fitting, or not desirable to my mother. And so I was constantly getting in trouble for even just hanging out with her. And so I remember that became a very um, tough days, because at that point, I'll just be transparent, in this in for regarding that, is I was, what, 17, and still getting spankings. Well, I say still getting spankings. That I was getting spankings for is because mom, was told me not to hang out with her. She didn't really go to my school. We met it actually in church, and it started out, very friendly. She was having a hard time, because of her dad had passed very early, and there was some things. I don't want to get into all of that, but so we just became friends, and then we just kind of, you know, um, it was just, we were there for each other, I think, in that time. But then again, my feelings were um, different, and so, but it turned into that, and so I would get in trouble because I just refused to not hang out with her. That was like my first um, girlfriend or attraction. It ended up that way, but it didn't start that way. And a friend, really. And so I was not going to not hang out with her. At that point, it was already in motion. And, there was really not much I say I couldn't do anything about it. I was a teenager. So you think you know everything as a teenager, and you're going to do what you want to do at that point. Um, you know, Even as much as my parents, raised me and disciplined me, and my sisters, sometimes really too much, but biblically, without going there. But anyway, it was already in the motion. So that's what I'm going to say about that. So what what happened was I ended up, yeah, I was a junior. It was, I think, that summer or something. Well, like I said, I refused not to. Well, I come home, and of course, um, it was obviously apparent where I was, and I don't know if I was lying back then. I'm sure I was, but where I was, but my mother knew, and so I literally, at that point, at 17, I literally, she was so mad and furious with me, that I just literally, I feel like I got a beating, um, by both my parents, because my mom was mad. My dad, he was going along with my mom because, I had been repeatedly warned not to hang out with her. And I think my mom knew at the time, but she wouldn't call it for what it was, or ask me about it for what it was. She just didn't. And so I literally got a beating about that. And at that point, I remember I was done. Um, I I I at that point I couldn't cry. I mean, I couldn't even. There was no emotion. Like, it was like, beat me if you will. We're all done here. I'm checking out, and do what you got to do, but you're not going to get any more emotion out of me. You're not going to get any more um, fear, whatever it was. I literally was done with that. And so um, I took my licking, and at that point, I remember making up my mind that I was done with all that, and I was leaving as soon as I possibly could. And so I did. Now, what happened when I was working I want to say I was working at McDonald's in another town where she lived. And I had already, talked it over with her. She talked it over with her mother, I think. No, no, she didn't. Her older sister she was married and lived, in her own apartment. And so what happened was, what I can remember of those things, but I ran away. When I was at the end of my junior year, I ran away and decided I was not going back. And so I was headed to work, had my clothes in the back, and was headed to work. And all of a sudden, it was nighttime. I worked, in the summertime. I say nighttime. It was, yeah. I closed. I was closing that day, and I think it was the weekend. So I was on my way to work. I think it was 7ish, something like that, and get into an accident. So I drove a big Charger, a Dodge Charger, and you can't stop those cars very fast. And I was like the fourth one back, and somebody up ahead slammed on their brakes, and obviously, I was the last one, and boom, I smacked into somebody. Well, I was so upset. I was mad because at that point I was like, it would just happen. All of a sudden, I remember going up, and I literally smacked my head on the windshield and cracked it. And when I came back, I remember I reached up and I felt my head and looked to see if it was bleeding. It wasn't bleeding, thank God. And that's when I just went off. I was just like, I was like, what happened? I was trying to get out, and my door was stuck because of the hood, the impact. I mean, it wasn't totaled. Yeah, I could still drive, but because I ended up driving to her sister's. I didn't even go into work. But I couldn't get out because my door. Well, somebody came. This man, he that was in the accident. He came, was checking on everybody, and he got to me. And he was like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And he was trying to open the door, and I said, "Yeah." I said, "Can you?" But I can't open the door, and so I ended up going to the passenger side, and I got out there. And when I got out of that car, I was so mad. I was like, "Who stopped? What happened? What idiot?" And like, I was so mad. And of course, they're like, "Yeah, she's fine." So, but anyway, I didn't go to the hospital. I was like, okay, I got to get out of here. Well, I don't remember what happened, if they got the information or whatever, but all I remember next is I'm over at her sister's house, laying on the couch because I started not feeling very well. But I was okay. Nothing was bleeding. I don't believe nothing was broke or whatever. But I just was laying on the couch, and I was just like, oh my goodness. And so next thing you know, hour or two later goes by, and of course they're wondering why I'm not going to the hospital. And I'm like, I don't need to go to the hospital. Well, then my parents show up. So of course nobody knows, I think, except for my girlfriend at the time, that I was actually running away. So my parents show up and they're mad. My mom's mad because I didn't come home. I didn't, obviously because I was where I shouldn't have been, which is what she had been, you know, what I wasn't supposed to be doing anyway. So she was upset, but I could tell she was also a little worried. So next thing you know, they take me home. Okay. So I don't say anything. But I don't remember after that really how long it took, but at the end of the day, um, I finally did leave and I didn't go back. And I remember calling, I'm like, I'm not going back. I'm going to stay with my girlfriend here. And of course, I didn't say that, but I said, I'm just staying over here. And so she let me, she, was like, well, okay. Well, my girlfriend's mom, it kind of came on her. And of course, I really, that's a vague memory for me. I just remember I just couldn't stay there no more. And her mom didn't want me to, but at the same time, um, I think she understood the situation. And so she allowed me, but she said, if you're going to stay here, you're going to have to finish school, because I was actually going to quit high school in my junior year and just start working and all of that. But she said, no, if you're going to stay here, you're going to finish high school. And so I did. And so I ended up finishing high school with her. She I think she was a year younger than me. And so it was kind of, one of those things where it was just all of a sudden life was just perfect. We at that point we kind of were in a relationship. Um and so it was great. I'd go and meet her at her class, and we walk to class together, and or I'd walk her to class, and at the end of the school, I'd wait for her, and we'd walk. The school actually was literally across the street, so we'd walk, home together, and it was great. It was kind of I was finally like living on my own at that point, working and but still going finishing school. Well, um, obviously things don't always work out. There became friction because I think her mom started kind of uh, detecting things, and of course she's Christian too, and so she was getting on to her about all of that, and so it became a tough situation for her as well as for me. And so at that point, I was getting ready to graduate, finish school. I graduated. My parents did come. We managed somehow, thank the Lord, because really we all were church people. However, I was not saved at that point. But her mom did the best she could. She was uh, kind to me, and she prayed for me and her daughter. And she didn't kick me out or anything like that when she kind of started probably figuring things out. So I was really grateful for that. But so I was just it was like I was just a lost puppy out there, just rebelling. I was just doing whatever I want to do. I was just so um yeah, just I was just kind of a mess. I was very arrogant and cocky, and it's almost like after you kind of are under you know, oppression for so long and very strict parents. When you get out on your own, you kind of go a little wild. And I went wild for a while, a long while. But I can go into that. But the video is kind of getting a little long, but I just wanted to start with that, and then I'll, um, I don't know, maybe continue on. But I did graduate, but at that point, there was some tension, and even then, she also, I think, started to have other friends, which she had, but started to, because she was attractive, and so she ended up with some guys that were, because we were hiding it. We weren't really out, but so guys were asking her out and stuff like that, and I was a tomboy, so I mean I was um not the kind of girl guys were looking at. So that was that, and so I realized, I started seeing kind of the end coming, and so I made a decision to join the military, and that's when I decided to join the army. Now, at that point, I was like, well, I don't know if I want to go full time. I'm just going to try it out, and so thankfully, I think, so I just did the reserves. So you do your time, you go to basic training, you do your MOS training, and then depending on what that is how long your training is and where it is, and then you get out, and then you complete your contract, 6 to 8 years. I think it's 8, um, doing your reserves, which is once every month or something like that. So that's what I did. And so I joined the military after I finished high school. So I literally was being shipped off to uh, Fort Fort Jackson, South Carolina, at 18. And so I finished high school and went into the military right after that. And that became a another huge eye opener. Um, but I was already, at that point I was already on my way. And so I'll cover that in the next video. But thank you for listening. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to reply. I didn't realize that I turned those off. But anyway, I'm hoping that maybe I can make a few videos and share my testimony about how the Lord had brought me out of homosexuality and being a lesbian, what got me into that, um, which I didn't really cover, but perhaps moving on down the road here, maybe I can, maybe that'll come in. So that's kind of how things started for me. Now, before all of that, I did go to a few bars here and there, in high school. But anyway, I started making other friends on that. But then, yeah, when I joined the military, that's pretty much when I left Georgia for a little while and started kind of getting out there. But anyway, next time. But hope everybody's doing well. And if you have any questions, I hope maybe you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. And thanks very much for listening. Subscribe. And if you think someone might be able to benefit or find encouragement in this series or whatever it may end up being, definitely share. Thanks so much, and God bless.